Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Also below this video you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. One last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by Neil, 10th Man, Brian's Logic, Father of a Stolen Child, and a whole bunch of people in Discord. So welcome, one and all.
Good morning, everybody.
Hey, good morning. Happy Friday.
Hello, good to have you all. Morning. And also welcome to Arwen, who's just joined. Any evidence that you can have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container to press upon?
Hello.
Hello.
No evidence for that. Zero evidence for that.
Yes, bending of space-time.
Zero evidence for that.
Any scientific evidence of gravity, Arwen? Specifically scientific evidence, cause and effect reasoning, observed phenomena.
Sorry, say again?
Scientific evidence of that which you claimed in regards to gas pressure without a container. You said bending space-time. That would be gravity. So any scientific evidence thereof?
But we don't know how to alter the bending of space-time, right? So we can't really very manipulate it.
That's a no. Anybody else? Any scientific evidence of gravity?
No. Mass doesn't attract mass, that's for sure.
No, that's correct. 106 years out of date.
You can't have scientific evidence of a mathematical model because you can only test that mathematically.
When you say test,
still,
hold on.
I still think it's a good solution, though.
Terminology, slight issue with that terminology, Brian. What do you mean test?
Well, you could mathematically create scenarios where that would mathematically work.
Oh, another terminology issue. What do you mean work? You're using terms that I consider physical terms. Work, right? Sweat coming out of somebody. You can picture what work is. Doing work is something physical. Well, that's physics, physical, right? So, another terminology issue. The reason I've got a problem with test is because, that, again, in physics terms, test is an experiment. And when you're qualifying how maths can work when you're testing, it's like, oh, hold on. These terms, while they might be interchangeably in a colloquial sense, in terms of physics, no. We're definitely not performing any tests when we do maths. And it's definitely not doing any work.
But that's why I use those terms. That's why I use them specifically, because I also use the term maths. Right? It's an oxymoron. It's a paradox. Can't be done. That's my point. Can't be done. Can't do that. Can't test mathematics with mathematics or with that test. If you know what I mean.
Indeed. Taking it from the abstract and putting it into the physical is not possible. Physics deals with the physical. Maths deals with the abstract.
But you can still calculate it, though.
That's fascinating.
Nowadays.
Go on, John.
I was going to say nowadays, not only do you have to deny science to believe you live on a ball and say it doesn't prove anything, but you have to deny measurements.
What? What measurements?
Of the flat plane we dwell atop.
No, but that's curve function collapse.
No, he's
right?
contextually flat
Things
Earth.
are not where they seem to be.
We're both confused because he's contextually flat Earth for a change. Right, John, indeed. You not only, as a globe-believing fundy muppet, have to be a science denier, because everything you punt under the title or banner of science is actually pseudoscience, because you don't have any science. You deny real science and claim things such as science doesn't prove anything when that's its sole purpose. Well, that's making you globe-believing fundies science deniers. You also have to deny the nature of the measurements discussed, although you're obviously not privy to this watching live, in the pre-show. Because in the pre-show we're discussing how it's measured flat. How the assumptions of zenith positions to presuppose spherical Earths via WGS-84, if you're talking about GPS, are merely just that. Presuppositions that then go on to use Euclidean measurements to measure it flat. They measure it on a plane, because that's what we're dealing with.
Thousands of
Curve
miles
function
flat.
Say again, are we?
Thousands of miles.
Curve function collapse. It's not fair.
It's not physics. Curve function collapse, regardless of it being made up or not, is you describing how somebody in physical terms observes it flat. That would be your opening disclaimer. To disclaim the dirty detail in the title would be to say curve function collapse. What does that mean? Well, a curve function's a mathematical derivative, right? It's a probability. A probability of you seeing curve. The collapse bit is what we actually observe, right? Are in the flatness.
Right. And it proves that when you look at it, any curve function it may have had will collapse. So, yeah, it's always going to present itself as a flat plane for as long as you try to detect anything about it. But, yeah, as long as you don't do that, then you can still calculate it as a globe. Always will.
Usually things that are flat present themselves flat. Usually. That's the way I always see things. They present themselves flat because they're flat.
They measure as flat because they're flat.
Yep. But
What's
when
that I
you
hear
say
you cry?
present
Correct.
themselves to you, that means that you're observing it. So of course it is going to present itself flat because the curve function
That's
is
way
collapsing.
too logical.
What curve function?
The curve function that 90 whatever % of the Western world are under when they assume that they can reify a mathematical heliocentric sphere Earth concept into something that's physically observable. Well, that notion is curve. And now Arwen's describing that as a curve function on a sort of joke, tongue-in-cheek joke about the double slit or quantum eraser experiments, where you've got wave function collapse. Well, he's saying curve function is the Western worldview that you can measure or perceive in some way a curved Earth. You can't. And every time you try to, you find it's flat.
Exactly.
No, I understand that. But everything is flat. It's
That's right,
thousands
Neil.
of miles flat. The oceans are thousands of miles flat.
That's right.
Well, only when you actually go out to physically measure it or visually or detect it, scan it. Yeah, that's all forms of detection, and that's when the curve function collapses.
Right. If you're trying to navigate it, you're going to navigate it flat because it is flat. But that's obviously because you're doing something in physical terms. So you're going to do it in context of flatness, like, again, we discussed on the pre-show in terms of triangulation with the stars. You know, you're going to be negotiating flatness because you couldn't be deriving 90-degree angles to the zenith point of the stars to triangulate unless it was flat. So you've definitely got to actually negotiate it flat because it is.
Well, if you can't use optics to figure out if you're on a ball, how are you going to figure out you're on a ball without optics?
You go to a fake
You
place called
calculate it.
Narnia. I mean space, and just claim on the telly that people have seen it from a fake place you can't get to.
Well, it wouldn't
No,
that be optical?
There's a better way to do it, grassroots. You just calculate it and then prevent looking past surfaces because that's typically where the curve function collapses, right?
Well, anywhere in physical reality, Arwen, anywhere. So therefore, to negate the curve function collapse, just to play along with this complete horseshit that you're dribbling into the show, right? If you can take it away from somewhere that's physical, then the curve function collapse won't happen. It only happens when you try and observe your reality physically. So if you can have these things take place, i.e. the photographs of Earth from space, in a non-real place, then you can negate the curve function collapse and see it as a ball. Not see it as a ball, but you know what I mean.
It's got to be
What you
close
could
enough, right?
do-
But if you go away from the flat surface or the apparent flat surface, right? It's further away you go from the surface you're looking over, the less the curve function collapse happens, right? Because it's really dependent on how close you are to the surface you're looking over.
Correct. And
For
then
the-
you've got to take it to some sort of isolated environment, maybe something like a studio. And then when you're in that isolated studio TV environment, you can negate the curve function collapse altogether. Obviously, you then have to reintroduce elements of reality with things like screens and CGI. But that's all good. That's a necessity. You've got to.
Besides TV, and what
Otherwise,
they
people
show
are
us,
not going to understand.
besides
right?
TV and what they show
Neil.
us on the videos, has anybody seen a sphere anywhere?
Play basketball.
No.
Sphere Earth, you mean?
No. But I was making a new
Yes,
argument.
sphere Earth.
No, Neil. They only claimed pictures of it, or claimed people who are the only people in this argument that can definitely be labelled liars, are people claiming to be in a second law of thermodynamics violation sky vacuum called outer space, that is a fake place, and in this crazy narrative that we're describing now, that is the only way to achieve curve function collapse. But obviously, if you're in a studio environment to keep it nice and controlled, you've then got to reintroduce those elements of the reality you're trying to prove in CGI or with screens to achieve it.
Yes, it's just getting a little frustrating because we never observe spherical Earth, yet we're debating about it every day. It's
Yeah, but
driving me bananas.
Yeah, but that's the whole issue, right? They had
It
to
is an issue. This
CGI
is
it because otherwise the people wouldn't understand.
Hold on,
They
Alvin.
don't know. It's very complicated to understand the world is actually a sphere when every time you try to observe it, the curve function collapse happens. So they just had to show it more as it really is in order to make people understand.
No, this is a different ongoing issue with Neil, specifically, Arwin. Just give me a minute with Neil. Your issue is that society, on the whole, believes that they're on a sphere when, to you, and this is, I'm going to phrase this carefully, what you're telling yourself, it's obvious, observable, and you can declare it with, all the gusto that you muster. Well, your issue is that you want society to follow your model. You want them to see the world how you see it. And that's something that you're going to drive yourself nuts with, Neil. This is, I think, the third occasion we've brought this up on the show, specifically for you. But you're concerned that other people don't see it the way you see it are going to drive you nuts. And there's no benefit to you.
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if there was evidence that presents it the way they're telling us it is, I'm not getting it. You got people fighting tooth and nail for this globe, and evidence has been presented. If you presented the same amount of evidence to me that this flat Earth was nonsense, you think I'd still be here?
Yeah, I don't disagree. You are, but you're not at peace with it, is my point, Neil.
Oh, no, I'm not at peace with this nonsense. Get it?
No, I
Get it
understand,
right.
Neil. I understand, Neil. It's basically we all observe the same world, yet a large portion of the population seem to want to keep on trying to tell themselves it's a completely different thing than it is. Because it is. The globe Earth and flat Earth are two completely different things. So it's a complete denial of reality. And that's really what bothers Neil. Because Neil, I would say 95% of the time you live in stark reality, Neil, yes?
Yes.
I think most of the time, most people don't care either way.
No, Neil doesn't. Neil lives in the Matrix, and he wants the Matrix to change, rather than stepping away from the Matrix. So by Matrix, I mean the societal element, the people who are part of a construct that see the world in a different way to you do. That's the Matrix. It's something that potentially you may never be able to change, Neil. Now, while there might be optimistic viewers that go, yeah, we're really changing the world by debating this subject, whereas I would hope, my best hope for the audience would be that they find peace with this, as opposed to want to change the world with this.
No, I want to change the world. Sorry.
Well, I don't want to change.
Finding peace is not action orientated enough. Sorry. But if you're happy with that, that's fine.
Well,
Okay.
I want to change the world by helping people to ascend and master all of it. right?
Can you?
When you master the propaganda, then it no longer damage or doesn't necessarily have to damage you. You'll still be confronted with the results of it. That way, to basically get a grassroots grip kind of on the situation for everybody and find a way through. Master.
Are you still talking about curve collapse?
Yeah, we
Function
are.
collapse.
Yeah, it's linked into the curve function collapse represents the societal/physical link between the matrix version of our reality, sphere Earth, and the natural, observable, demonstrable flatness that we actually dwell atop. Curve function collapse is the transitional state that Neil's being dragged into this argument because he isn't finding peace with it, and it's his world. You cannot perceive the world through society's eyes. You can only perceive it through your own, and you can only conform with society, rebel against society, or detach yourself from society. And there are obviously grey areas in between all of those different states. I remember back looking at Freeman movement and people, who was it? It wasn't Pete Shea. Oh God, I can't remember to credit the guy, but he described if you're familiar with the straw man, which I'm sure a lot of you are, I'm not going to detail it in any length here, but he described that concept as a coat. Sometimes you have to go out, you have to put on your straw man coat, and you have to partake in certain aspects of society that you may not want to. You put your capitalized letter name badge straw man coat on and walk into the DVLA or whatever you guys call it over in the States, the place where you register your car, and you sign over the DMV, and you sign over your ownership to the government. So you become the caretaker of property that ain't yours anymore. Now, you do that so you don't get pulled over by the police, and you can have a peaceful life when you interact with that aspect of society. And when you get home, you take it back off again. You hang it back up, and you don't think about it anymore. You don't worry about that capitalized straw man that you've had to become to do that. But do you then say, well, now I've taken off the coat, I need to get in touch with everybody in my community and explain to them that that's what they're doing when they take part in that process, and that they need to detach at some point from it. Well, it's like, no, you need to, if you're looking for peace, understand it so that you can find peace from it, because that is changing the world, because the world is only what you experience. You cannot experience a societal worldview. It's impossible. So therefore, changing the world is appreciating the actual nature in this particular context. Obviously, this is flat earth debate, and then finding peace with it. Then you've changed the world. I've changed the world. For me, my world's changed.
All right, let me give.
Hold on. It's like saying, this is what it's to me. It's like somebody keeps telling you that 10 times 10 is 50. You're gonna smack them and say, no, it's not. It's 100.
Let's try it in a different context, Neil. Let's say there's as we get called it a lot, a crazy cult, right? Howling at the moon, full on bonkers cult, right? Now, you laugh, there's going to be something similar to that out there somewhere in Western world.
Yeah.
There's going to be something like that, right? Now, are you the one who appreciates that howling at the moon isn't going to bring aliens, for the sake of argument, nice and topical? Do you need to bang your head against the wall for the rest of your natural-born life to convince those people in that cult that they're not going to bring aliens by howling at the moon? Or do you just remove yourself entirely from that nonsense, crazy, batshit insane group of people, right? Now, don't get me wrong, there's going to be obviously grey areas in this description to this very, very basics. So I'm not saying, family member's part of it, and I've got to try and get... I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about you in this particular scenario. Yes, you will have to overlap, and there'll be a grey area when it comes to heliocentric interactions with the normies that interact in the Matrix. You're going to have to deal with that. But is it are you like one of the members of the Nebuchadnezzar? Are you a chosen one with glasses out there to physically alter the nature of the Matrix? I don't think so. I think these systems are so ingrained in our current society and so well fortified and protected by the people who initiated them that you're never going to make a dent, right? But what are you trying to make a dent in? Well, you're trying to make a dent in the walls of the compound that houses the people howling at the moon. Now, don't get me wrong, they sell the best kumquats there is. So occasionally you've got to go through those gates and negotiate with them. And it's a pain in the ass and they're completely bonkers. And sometimes you just have to interact with them. But are you going to stand on the outside of their gates telling them that they're all nuts and that they don't need to howl at the moon? No, you just go and buy your beautiful kumquats from them and you leave and you moan at it when you get out if you have to. But you don't let it dominate your life. Now, that is akin to your position currently, Neil. You know, you're fighting with a society that you're never going to change.
That was a great description, Nathan. Thanks for that.
Yeah, that was
Seriously.
nice.
All right,
Well,
Yeah, well done.
Except for the
Let me-
couple.
I would say
Just
Neil,
have a
you
little
go
laugh
first.
to yourself about it and move on.
You've just reminded me to give a shout out to Thrice 8 Hermes. He puts a jester on his backdrop when he does his monologues. Great guy. But he's a bit anti-religious. If you're a Christian, you might not necessarily like him all that much because he does knock Christians a fair bit. With rightful cause, in my opinion. Just drop that in with a slight squint. Anyway, Thrice 8 Hermes sticks a jester. And jesters, if you've studied clowns and things of that nature, which I have, they're typically depressed, right? They're morose, deep people, right? Out there trying to clown and cheer up the people, right? Well, their contemplation and depression is born out of a realization that you can't necessarily do anything about the normie society, except perhaps find peace with it. And then you turn around and just laugh. When you see people doing normie things or talking in normie ways or not recognizing clear rhetoric and programming, you know, you just have to laugh because otherwise you go bonkers or depressed.
well,
Exactly.
what I would
Exactly.
say is this, right? I'm going to give an example that goes against that completely, right? If the whole world knew what GPS actually was and how GPS, right, as they know it, the global positioning system actually works, then would they all be so convinced that they're on a globe? No, is the question. They wouldn't. And if you don't try and tell them those things, they'll never know about it. So for me to be involved in this also means that I have to put in an effort out in the world, as whatever I can do, to try and show people what they believe is not reality.
Why?
I'm not going to be.
As long as
Hold on,
you're
hold
at
on,
peace
let me
with
finish
it.
Hold on.
Hang
Just
on,
get to the
let
end
me
of your-
finish.
As
As long as you're
Let me
at peace
finish.
with it, then
Yeah, let me finish. Let me finish now. I won't be knocking on people's doors. I won't be approaching the man on the street. But I will be continually trying to get the information out there that we're not on a globe Earth.
Why?
Because that is what I'm passionate about. I want people
Also-
to know the truth. I want people to want the truth. I want people to know the truth. I'm not going to tell a lie. I don't mind it. I want people to know the truth. It's a lie. That's that.
Okay, one more time.
That's what I was
Hold
gonna
on, hold on, Ted. Hold on. Just one more time. Bearing in mind I have just listened to you. Why? Why do you want to get them the truth?
Why do I want to tell them the truth? Because it would be a better world if they all knew the truth.
Would it? How'd you know that?
Yeah.
How'd you know that?
Because we wouldn't be living in a lie.
What makes you think that would make it a better world?
Because it's self-evident.
Yeah, because it's self-evident. We haven't found out.
Well,
I mean,
whether it's better or not, it would be true.
yeah, exactly. It would be true, which would be better.
Perfect. I've led you beautifully. So that
Exactly.
means that your world is better then, Brian. You listening, by the way, Neil?
Yes,
Sorry,
I'm
Nathan.
listening. But one
So,
thing.
so you've
Who's
just
the first
explained to me.
people-
You've just explained to me in very clear terms that the world is better for this truth, and I gave a lengthy monologue about it being your world. Therefore, based on what you've told me, your world, Brian, is better. Correct?
No, my world is more honest.
I wouldn't even look at it that way. It's all truth, not just this truth. All
Hold on,
truth
Ted.
is
I'm
important.
Let me
taking
ask you a
Brian
question.
down
Who's
a
the
route of
first one to
contemplation
come out?
for the benefit of Neil. by logical conclusion, you've said, I want to tell the world because the truth will set them free. The truth is better. The world would be a better place if they had the truth. Well, you have the truth. Therefore, by logical deduction, you are in a better world now, aren't you, Brian? That's what you're telling me.
Oh, Nathan, you know what?
Yeah, I am.
Neil,
I
just
am.
listen. Don't say anything. Just listen, Neil. Go ahead, Brian.
Leave me.
Well,
Okay,
it
leave
makes me
respond.
angry because I see how you're leading them. And yeah,
No, it's okay, Neil.
you're right.
It's okay.
Yeah,
It's okay.
Neil,
I-
just spare your ejaculations. Just let Brian respond because he'll forget the point otherwise.
I am at present not in a better world, but I'm hoping with my actions and the actions of other people like me, including you, Nathan, that we will end up in a better world. It's not a better world yet, but I can see
Dear.
that the
So
world
there's
can be better.
that's a problem. See, I'm so glad that Brian's a really honest person, possibly the most sincere person here on the panel. I say that hand on heart, right? That could have gone wrong for me. This point I'm about to make. So Brian's logic fails. Hey, that worked nicely, didn't it? Because his logic stacks up that he'll be immensely happy and his world will be a better place for having this. Yeah, that's not necessarily the case now, is it? So he's chasing that dragon and projecting it onto society. Now, Neil knows where that was going. That's why he interjected. And so does Brian. He wouldn't have been able to lead me to this place. But your logic doesn't stack up, Brian. Because if it did, you'd be the most happy person in the world. Now, by contrast... I'll go on.
No, you're off there, Nathan. You're totally off there.
We'll get to you, Ted. I know you're...
Can I ask you a question here?
Let Brian respond, then we'll go to Neil, then we'll go to 10th. We've also got someone, I think it was Rams, who's been waiting patiently as well. So first Brian, then Neil, then 10th, then Rams.
I never said that it would change. I never said the word happy. Happy, I didn't say the word happy. I said better. Now, better can lead to happier, right? But I can't guarantee everyone's going to be personally happy. But I can guarantee that if the world knew what it really was, that it would be freer. People would know where they are. People wouldn't be living in a lie. Which is better.
Okay, Neil, go ahead.
Okay. Who's the first people when you're in a cult or in a deception? The people that come out of it are the ones that try to get the other people out of it, like Leah Remedi with Scientology or whatever her name is, that actress. Tries to get them out. So now we've been removed. Our eyes have been opened. So now we fight to open the eyes of others because we care. And you care or you wouldn't be doing the show. No matter how you deny that you care, you care.
Nah, I disagree totally.
Yeah,
I'll come to that later in terms of my view, because I see it as a psychopathic system, and there's no contact rules that apply that would lead me far away from that conclusion in terms of going back and knocking on the walls of the cult. No. 10th, go ahead.
Yeah, those who have ears will hear. Those who have eyes will see. There's a deception. Doesn't matter what the deception is. It could be a religious deception. It could be on this cosmology or the nature of our reality with the flat earth versus the globe. It's just deception overall. And if you are a person of empathy and you know the truth on that subject, you want to share it with people you care for. Now, whether they accept it or not is up to them. And whether they do or not doesn't change how I feel. I have the truth and I want to share it. Now, if someone comes and says, well, your truth is a lie, and I'll say, well, show it to me because I really want the truth. And if you could show me I'm mistakenly thinking a lie is truth, I'd like to know. So if you're geared the way I'm geared, I want truth because the truth will set you free no matter what the subject is. Now, if you're saying the way you do, Nathan, because you're kind of like, I don't care. It's up to them. I'm just going to find a way to live in this matrix that benefits me and my family. Well, that's fine. That's the way you want to handle it. But the way Brian and Neil and I, at least on this point, have a convergence is that we'll share it with people as long as they want to hear it. If they don't want to hear it, we'll move on and we'll share it with other people. And then the numbers will grow and grow and grow, and people will come out of this lie. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a noble action.
Good point.
Exactly, Dan.
Okay, Rams.
Well, I think a lot of it comes from projecting your own battle with what quote unquote truth.
I completely agree.
Well, truth is objective. It's not subjective.
It varies from person to person. What is true in this statement isn't true for you or I.
That's not true. The person varies. Truth
Exactly.
is objective.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. And for you and I, this doesn't hold true. We've got a very different, you personally, Tent, and I personally. And that's Rams's point. He might not feel this way at all, but that's his point. But
No, hang on. I got to interrupt. That's the way we assess it. But
What's we?
truth assessing us will not vary.
Well, hold on. We've gone from you to we and us. What's going on?
But what I'm saying is, if I say to a baller, using the arguments I've learned from the show, and prove to him, beyond the shadow of a doubt, using the same language and the same construct of meanings, and he still looks at it and says, air is not the atmosphere, straight is curved, all this junk that the ballers say to us, then I'm going to say, okay, you're violating the rules of our language. The meanings you're changing in order to still believe in the lie. I'm done talking to you. You're not an open vessel to even hear about it or go back and forth with. So I'll just go find someone else who wants to come out of whatever lies they're in and go to the truth, because the truth is not going to change. And I'm always trying to live my life to truth. So I'm going to change. I'm not going to ask the truth to change.
Fair enough.
Yeah, there was only one truth, regardless if there's 8 people arguing and only one of them is actually telling the truth. It doesn't matter if all 8 people believe their own stories. If only one of those 8 is true, then that's the only opinion that matters, because everyone else's opinions are just opinions. It doesn't matter if people feel they're like, I can speak to a baller and he'll be telling me that it's definitely a ball. And he'll believe that as the truth. But it's not the truth, is it? That's different.
I have a point. It's not exactly what you all are talking about, but no one ever changed the world who believed they couldn't.
Well said.
Exactly, John.
That's right. It only takes one man. I am William Wallace.
And I'm saying you can only experience your world. So I specifically said, John, just to not exactly counter that, but, I have changed the world is a statement that's very personal. Whereas...
How do you say that? How can you say that?
My world has changed.
No, the previous statement. Your world. It's not my world. It's our world. It's the same world. There's truth and deception commingled together. The key is to find out.
Well, no, your perception...
Why is it my world?
Well, no, because the perception is what builds your reality. How you process your world is your world.
No, I understand how you're saying that, but again, we're back to what truth means versus my version of truth. My world and my perception is formed by my mind. If I'm deceived, it's the wrong view. If someone leads me to the truth, then I could perceive it the way it's supposed to be perceived. It's still the same world.
The separation. There's a process in the trenches here that Arwin describes with the curve function collapse, where you've got one particular measurable physical world and one particular perception of the world. Now, at that point, you just have pain. That's trench level pain for the globe believers when they have to defend the undefensible in terms of geometric horizons and such like. But for your average normie, that's why I say my world has changed, that isn't subject to that cognitive pain. That said, I was to a certain degree. I was very conscious of it when I was a globe believer. That aside as well, let's just pretend for a second that I wasn't conscious of it. That was my world. That just was the world I lived in. So when I contemplated and thought I was having deep philosophical thoughts as I stared up into the bleak, never-ending sky vacuum, that was the context that I experienced my world in a very literal way. That was the experience I had. I can even go back now, cognitively and mentally, picture me being there, looking up at the sky, contemplating the bleak vastness of it, even drawing pictures about it to conceptualize it in my mind. with a little bit of cognitive pain there at the same time. Again, but brush over that. Now, my world isn't like that. I don't have the same emotions, the feelings, the perception is different. And that is your, but in context, my world. That is my world, and it has changed. Now, has the world physically changed? No. You can't physically change the flat plane we dwell atop. That won't ever happen.
No, I think we're talking along the same lines, just in a different way. Your world changed because, or your perception of the world changed because you found the truth. And that's exactly what Brian and Neil and I are saying. So you share it with those that want to hear it, and their world will change. It will match the truth of the world rather than the perceived version of the world.
Perfect. Paul has summed it up beautifully from the chat. There's truth.
You can lead a horse to water, but if the horse doesn't want to drink, then don't get frustrated trying to force it to drink.
No. So Paul has summed it up beautifully from the chat. There's truth, and then there's personal convictions. Precisely. Well put, Paula. Sorry, Rams. Go ahead.
I was just saying you can lead a horse to water, but if the horse doesn't drink, then don't get frustrated at the horse for not drinking, or try to force
You give
it
the
to
horse
drink.
salt. You give the horse salt. Give the horse salt. He'll be thirsty and he'll drink. And we give them salt every time we bring them truth.
You know what? You really ponied up on that one.
Okay, Nathan.
Yeah.
When you found out, right? Because I remember you telling this story several times, because it's very similar to my own story.
Come on.
When you found out that the Earth was not a globe and it was flat, did it not make you excited? Did it not have a big change? For everyone here, did it not create a positivity in your world that you didn't have before, a freedom, like a release?
Yes.
So that's why I want everyone that I can possibly give it to experience that.
Yeah, but it's what led me to that experience that was more important than that experience, because
there we go.
That experience is inevitable once you start seeking genuine truth yourself. If you're not looking for that, then
is it not just a chemical high that you're chasing?
Yeah.
So you've experienced that. I know exactly. When you said that, what goes through my mind is waking my wife up. Going, it's flat. And I go, what do you want? Me being very, very excited.
But I do see Brian's point, though, because sometimes for some people that experience begins, or that journey to that experience begins with somebody saying, hey, it's not a ball, right? Or something like that. Just having the topic brought up to you, we're out of nowhere, like we're not thinking anybody's going to do it. That's how that experience or that journey begins, I think, for some people. Because there are people that still to this day thank me for bringing this to their awareness. I'm like, well, you don't have to thank me too much. This is what you've experienced every day.
Number of years ago,
you know what I'm saying? Like,
laughed it off. I wasn't ready at the time.
Do a couple of quick shout outs. So shout out to Lex Luthor for joining as a penguin, and shout out to Godzilla37, who says, pursue the truth or live in the lie. Shout out to 10th man. Thank you very much for the super chat, Godzilla37.
Hey, can I jump in real quick and add something?
Of course you can. Go ahead.
Thanks, Nathan. So it's, for me, it's not just like spiritually knowing that the satisfaction I get of knowing that the Earth is not a globe. Like, my life has actually gotten better. Like, I make more money now. Maybe it's just like my outlook on life is better, more optimistic about things, but it improves the quality of life, for a lot of people. And I think, especially for you, Nathan, like, just think about it, like what you were doing before, traveling, doing the rep stuff. You said you had a lot of, not a lot of free time, but you had money. But now I feel like, I don't want to speak for you, but would you say that your life has gotten better just knowing that the Earth is flat?
It's fundamentally changed the person I am. So, as you correctly
Hell
identify,
yeah.
prior to this, I was a rep. I was jet setting, very money orientated. Had a flash car, and I considered myself James Bond as I flew all over the world. Well, from that to wanting to be, I don't want to say wanting to be poor, but wanting to be time rich, knowing that means you're going to be financially worse off. That said, that's not true, because I've got such amazing support in what I do by disseminating this information, which might seem counterintuitive, because I'm saying, well, just in a kind of selfish way, you need this to affect you personally in a positive way before you want to go out and change the world. Because if you're like Brian, you're going to describe how it will make the world a better place. It's like, well, is it a better place for you personally? And if it isn't, it's like, well, work on that, because that's all you've got, your own perception of the world and the reality that you've got. And that contemplation made me think, well, having time to actually experience life and the world, if you want, is much more important than having more money in my pocket or having a flash car. But like I say, I've received support. I've still managed to keep a admittedly 15-year-old car that I bought very cheap on the road, maintained nicely, shiny clean, because of the support I've got via a direct consequence of doing this subject. Now, I don't think that's true for many other subjects. I don't think many other subject matters would say, if I like to use this as a parallel, but the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial, I'm sure there's people who are supportive of channels that are similar size to mine, but it will pale in comparison if you stacked up the support I get me on this channel with this subject versus somebody who's covering that particular topic. By contrast, they wouldn't get anything like the support I get. It's phenomenal. I reach out and say my exhaust's broke and it's fixed. It's $1,000, or it was $1,000. Paid for it. It's done. I can take the kids and do the stuff and still do the show, and everything's running tickety-boo because of the support. Now, that is a bonus, because I anticipated hard times. It's going to be very difficult to make money on YouTube by doing something that I am also passionate about. So I want to drop this in right at the end of this, because this conversation's got to round out at some point. But yeah, the passion for the subject is why we're all here. I'm not going to make it seem like I'm just selfish. I'm like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. Who cares? Once you figure it out, just go into the world, skip amongst the daisies and everything. No. Obviously, I make a daily show about the subject, so don't get the wrong impression about why I'm saying these things. I'm just trying to get it across to Neil, bringing it back on focus point, in terms of his specific circumstances, where every time he details his frustration, it's at a societal level. And it's like, maybe you need to relinquish yourself from those societal things, those chains that are bringing you back to the walls of the nutcase asylum that are howling at the moon. Maybe you need to sever the chains rather than knocking on the wall.
Oh, those chains have been severed. But the funny thing to me is, I don't have a flat earth debate show. You could run and hide all you want. You are changing the world, and you want to change the world, and you care. Otherwise, you would not have a flat earth debate show.
Yes, Neil.
Maybe. Well, as I say, if somebody's going to come along and have the experience I've got, that's why I say earlier it could be a Brian chasing that hit, right? That experience is it cathartic? Is that the correct terminology? I think it is. It's a paradigm shift. Obviously, there's people who brace against this, so I'm not talking to you, fundies. In our you trust. Go in peace. But for us, right, for us,
Excellent.
that experience is like no drug you can describe, right? There's nothing, it gives me goosebumps just detailing it, right? Hearing those words emanate from the iPad, from Math Powerland, for me, that's life-changing. Like, completely life-changing. And I can totally understand someone like Brian going, I want to give that to somebody. Like a pusher. Like a drug pusher. Going, have some of this. This is beautiful. This is the best drug you'll ever take. And it is.
It is.
It's not, I'm not downplaying it. There's a reason there's so many people like us on this subject talking about it with the passion that we have. Because it's amazing, right? I'm not going to deny it. And you want to share that.
It'll make you wise beyond your years.
Yeah, I disagree
I
with
still
that too.
find no joy in it.
Neil, I've got to argue with every point Neil today. No, contrary to that, Neil, every single time I research something, I realise how little I know about it, and I feel that little bit dumber for not knowing. So whereas you can be Dunning-Kruger, cocksure and full of bravado when you're on the globe, and you're basically a wiki-parroting moron, right? when you actually look into those things and realize, oh, I thought I knew all about this, you know, that does not make you feel more intelligent. Now, if you can spin that, as I do, into
I don't know
wonderment
anything.
and possibility, then that's great. But for a lot of people, that's devastating, you know.
Well, for me, it wasn't, because I learned a lot. I didn't know anything until I started listening to Flat Earth Debate, you, QE, everybody else. So it made me wiser.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like, it does make people wiser, because as you're saying, you find the thing, all the things you kind of realize, all the stuff you don't know. Well, that is wisdom, because then you know your parameters. You're not living in fantasy thinking you know what the sun is when you don't. Let's say, just as an everyday example, you don't know. So, but that is wisdom. It's wisdom to know what you don't know. That, you know, it's wisdom to be intellectually humble or humbled. Gives wisdom, because not inferior, not intellectual inferiority, but humbleness. It's like I don't know all these things. You know, that is wisdom.
Yeah, having
that's
humility
okay.
and being humble and having wisdom. I don't know, right? So you've got a pile of this is known information, and then you've got another pile that is unknown information, right? And then you've got to start looking at the pile of rocks in each of these two piles, and this subject means that you start looking at the rocks in a pile that were known facts, and one by one putting them in the other pile of unknown stuff. Now you're saying, well, the process of realizing, well, I thought that the horizon was the edge of a sphere. Let's have a look at that. Oh dear, let's put that in that pile of unknowns. What's the horizon? Is it the diffraction limit? No, it's not as simple as that. Is it caused by weather? No, it's not as simple as that either. Have we got a concise and detailed explanation for what creates a horizon? I would say no. Now, does that mean we won't achieve that? I'm sure there'll be very smart people in the future that can qualify it in a more realistic and hopefully concise way that we currently can't. But we can definitely tell you what it's not, right? We can give you a modus tollens logical consistency about how if the Earth was a sphere, radius 3959, taking up that rock from the pile of known facts there, and having a little look at it, and what, seeming clever because I can put together a modus tollens formulation that then means that rock gets put into the unknown quantity pile. Now, at the end of that process, what are you left with? You're left with a circle that's got a label on it that says known facts, and there's sod all in it. And then you got this other pile, unknown stuff. Or you can even relabel stuff I thought I knew was clever because of it. You know, that's the new pile. So you're looking at these two piles going, there's a lot more I thought I knew but now don't, and a lot more stuff to ask questions about. And while I can tell myself that makes me very clever, it really doesn't make me feel that way. Maybe that's just me personally, but that's how I feel about it.
Yeah,
it's
not the
the point.
information that makes you wise. It's the ability to discern the truth out of the information.
Yeah, that's
And
kind of what I
giving
was
someone
saying.
that
That's what I was about to say
experience
as well.
or that ability to discern the truth from information, that's worth sharing.
Yeah, I was going to say something very similar. It's like, basically, Nathan, it's like this. You know to test all claims. You didn't know to do that before. You just accepted a claim. Someone say, that's this thing, and this thing is true. You go, okay. That's not what you're doing now, though. You test all claims. You go, oh, really? Well, what is the evidence for this? How is this validated? That's testing all claims. That is wisdom. You don't just accept. You know, you accept what you don't know.
Who's the smarter guy? The guy with the box of rocks sitting there labeled known facts? Hasn't gone through them, just has a box. Or the other guy who has gone through the box and has asserted, using logic and deduction, maybe some experimental validation, that these are not unknown. These are not known facts. Who's the smarter guy?
Well,
Exactly.
according to Michelle Thaler, those are her cousins.
That's another rock from the pile, isn't it? all of it has come from everything. Started at a big bang, and then through gravitational accretion and the process of stars being born, and then fusion, and then eventually the density becoming so intense that it explodes. That process creates all of the matter that we have. That then disperses into the universe, and the heavier elements are why we've got things like gold and various other stuff dispersed throughout our planet. Right? Wow, that sounded so clever. Let's have a little look at that.
Well, let me
Right.
let me share this. Let me share this real quick one here. So I was talking to the golfer that I'm working with, and of course we had this long trip to Washington State. So I put on the highlights of your show through the car Bluetooth system, and he said, "Well, pause there. Let me ask you a question." So pause there. So he said to me, "You know, when you first brought this up." I said, well, I'm gonna go check it out because he's not a crazy guy. But then he went and started doing his own research, unbeknownst to me until this car ride that we just had. And he says he looked at this, he looked at that, different channels. And then he said, the questions you asked, they're just solid. I mean, when you said about time, can you show me a box of time? That really like got me thinking. It is a concept. It is something that we made up to measure things, but it's not a causal force, like you said. So just a joy in my heart to hear that he took what I said, didn't immediately take it, but then went and did his own research. And then now he's telling me that what time is and how it works. That was just, I mean, this goes back to fruits of your labor, fruits of QE, fruits of everybody on the panel. And then we have this incident, and I happen to be there to witness it. This is what this whole show's about, right?
Yeah, indeed. But as I said, go on, Brian.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I actually I don't want to retract what I said a while ago about the wisdom. I'm totally behind that. But the actual truth was actually staring me in the face. And because it was so obvious, like everything, when it's totally obvious, you look straight past it. The real wisdom that you gain from this, and you've gained from this, from being involved in learning about what you don't know, is not the acceptance of what you know and don't know. And it's not that. It is that, but it's not that. The real thing you learn, the real wisdom is that to not be afraid of not knowing. Because that's the problem with our opposition, isn't it? They're all afraid of not knowing. They need to have some kind of an answer, because without that answer, they're terrified. We're not terrified of not knowing what the moon is.
Indeed, it is. It's fear and pain, cognitive dissonance, all of those things that we experience from trench level are what generate the high level of ridicule that we have to endure. Now, the thing is, that is also, it's the same, while I've described you wanting to project this joy onto other people, perhaps, the flip side of that coin, the inverse of that, is the globers wanting to project their pain onto us. That's why we suffer the ridicule we do. You know, the contemplation of, you know, everything being taken out of the metaphorical pile and having to be studied and then realizing you don't hold it anymore. A lot of people don't want to relinquish that. And, you know, that causes them cognitive dissonance when information's presented that cannot be held conducively or concurrently with whatever they're holding. So, you know, that's what we experience. But it must be telling, or I would think it was telling while we're having these sorts of conversations to a globe believer, that we're describing, for the most part, the joy of this subject while they're, fighting the flat earth? You know, another analogy I could describe, instead of banging on the walls of the nutcase asylum, would be to say, you know, if you're describing the scenario of getting beaten in a boxing match, you know, what you've got to do, son, you've got to keep, it's like, well, no, if you hate that, just don't climb in the ring anymore. You know, that's the solution. If your moan is that you're constantly, you know, losing badly and being hospitalized or something, it's like, yeah, don't get in the ring then. No, but I've got to get in there and fight. Well, no, you haven't. But that's the analogy for them. It's not like, no, I want you to experience that joy of realizing that actually the nature of the world is better than we've been led to believe. Well, no, for
Nathan-
them it's not that. It's quite horrific. It's quite a torturous process to hear this stuff.
Nathan,
And
if I
if
may,
you're getting in that ring and getting hurt all the time, then that also means that you haven't trained hard enough. You haven't trained well enough. You're not equipped well enough to be able to go out there and fight and win.
Exactly. That's why I'm using Neil as my scapegoat or my example for the audience's benefit when I say, well, look, it's not necessarily the case that you need to see yourself as Neo in the Matrix or as Morpheus in the Matrix. You know, you don't have to be that person. You might not necessarily be equipped to do so. But the thing that you can take from this conversation is that there are benefits in terms of the pleasure, the joy that you can take out of life if you're not about banging on the walls of the asylum, which many people are, and it's because they're angry. This is the overriding point,
Yeah.
right? For Neil again, right? You're annoyed, right? You're pissed. They lied to you. And you want people to know, not only that while they argue with you about how you've been lied to and you're just trying to tell them the bloody truth, for God's sake, right? But ultimately, you've been lied to, right? It's a bloody outrage. Now, I could totally relate, but you've got to move past
okay,
that.
let me share something here. So the whole point is, and you rounded it off nicely there, when we go and we share any truth with someone is because, you know, we care and we want them to see something that maybe has been submitted to them from a deceptive point of view. So it's a lie. You've been lied to. Let me share something with you. Hey, there's a big lie out there. Let me get your opinion on it. Now, I say it that way because I'm setting it up for the real thing that we get to check out. We get to check out if that person is even interested in truth or do they want to stay in the lie. So I've ran into many people, right? Even Christians. And I say to them, hey, this is a big lie. Let's get together. I want to share my findings. No, I'm not interested. Don't bring up the subject. You know, we're friends. We'll talk about anything else. I just don't want to talk about this. And I say to them, okay, that's great. We can talk about everything else but this. So you just showed me a little bit about yourself. You're afraid. Why are you afraid? Why? Because if I'm being lied to, you should care to correct me. But here I'm saying you're being lied to and I want to help you. And you say, no, not on this subject. Don't bring it up. But yeah, I'll see you for that barbecue.
I get that all the time.
Go on, Chocolate, take over.
It's fear. You've summed it up beautifully. It's fear. You know exactly what it is. They're scared. I use Conspiracy Cats in a public example and his interview with Haunted House. It's fear. That's all it is. They're scared. It's terrifying.
Fear of the unknown. Fear of the other. Fear of the unknown.
Told you, I've been told what you're saying. I cannot continue this conversation. I have a headache, all of that, because if anything that you're saying is true, it just means that my entire life I've been lied to, and that scares the hell out of me. That's like a direct quote from a coworker of mine.
Perfect way to end. If you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Primary Stream, stay tuned as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, though, this is where we bid the live audience farewell. So a huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and G+ panels for making today's live show possible. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on either Premiering Stream. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!